After my husband, Roger Wilson, disappeared without a trace, all that was left behind was a mountain of debt and a baby girl sobbing in my arms. Bill collectors then barged in, smashing everything in their path. I was forced to take my daughter, Alicia, and live a life of hiding from one location to another for 30 long years. I worked non-stop, day and night, without stopping or complaining, and paid off every cent of the debt that had been accrued. A modest fortune of my own, and brought up Alicia into a strong, capable woman. I watched her establish a career, start a family, and settle down. Just when I thought I would be able to enjoy a quiet retirement, a video from Roger, the man who vanished from our lives, appeared in my inbox, shattering everything I had assumed. Eva, the woman who once split up my family, was sitting next to him. At midnight, Alicia, my daughter, came home with her husband, Alexander, and their children. I had been planning to use my savings to buy Alicia a new house, but now there's no need, because a home built on lies and betrayal isn't something I want to be a part of anymore. Alicia was nestled lovingly in Eva's arms, calling her mom with the warmth and tenderness I'd once thought was reserved for me. Daughter Emma, I heard the noise outside as they entered. A short while later, Alicia knocked on my bedroom door. Mom, are you still awake? Emma is hungry. If you're not asleep yet, could you get her something to eat? I had been waiting all evening for good news that I couldn't wait to share with them. After responding to Alicia, I started to get out of bed to put on my shoes when my phone buzzed. Without thinking, I picked it up from my nightstand. It was a message from my longtime friend Maria. I ran into them today. You must know that immediately after the message, a video clip appeared. Before I could even look closely, my thumb unintentionally touched the screen, and the video began playing automatically. Alicia, who was supposed to be working late, was cuddled up in another woman's arms, looking gentle and content. When I saw the woman's face and the man sitting next to her, my pupils contracted and my chest tightened. The phone fell out of my grasp and onto the floor as I gasped for air, pressing my hand firmly against my chest despite the lines that time had etched on his face. I instantly recognized the man as Roger Wilson, my husband, who had disappeared more than 30 years ago, and seated next to him was Eva, the woman he had once harbored feelings for. The fact that Alicia looked so familiar with them in that video, as if she had known all along what was happening, shocked me even more. Roger, who left me and our daughter to flee his debts and vanished from our lives without even looking back, had returned in the most brutal way imaginable. I would recognize that face no matter how old he had gotten, even if it were reduced to ashes. Leaning comfortably against Eva of all people, my mind went blank, my chest felt unbearably heavy, and my heart was racing. By the time Alicia saw me outside the door and heard movement inside, she pushed the door open and said, "Mom, if you're awake, come on, Emma is starving." Emma didn't finish the sentence before her eyes fell on the. I took a deep breath, picked up the phone that was on the floor, and held it out to her, eager to explain this. Don't tell me that man isn't your father. 30 years ago, after Roger racked up massive debts, he abandoned me and our 1-year-old daughter without warning, disappearing into thin air to escape the creditors. Over the years, I tried to find him. The video was paused on the exact moment Alicia looked at Eva and called her mother. However, he only ever got in touch with us when he felt like it. He sent us sporadic letters without a return address and provided a hazy update before disappearing. Once more, the debt collectors couldn't locate Roger, so they pursued me instead, claiming that I was at fault because the loans were taken out after our marriage. I spent years paying for his mess, and for the past 10 years, I hadn't heard from him at all. I thought he was dead, but now he was alive and well back in my household. I will never forget those years of the relentless knocking on my door, the threats, the fear, and the humiliation that still haunt me. It felt like a slap in the face to parade around with the very woman who had once torn my family apart. If Roger had even the slightest bit of responsibility in him, he would never have abandoned his wife and child for more than 30 years. I only recently got back in touch with Dad. It's been so many years. Whatever happened between you two, can't you leave me out of it? He said he didn't have a choice when he left, he regrets abandoning me, and he wants to make up for lost time. We just didn't tell you. There was no way to hide it any longer. We knew you would be upset, so the way she handled it as if it were no big deal made me wonder if I was overreacting or if my anger was misdirected. Had she truly forgotten what our lives had been like after her father left and Roger vanished? I was still unemployed, having quit my job while pregnant, and hadn't returned yet. Alicia was only a year old when the debt collectors flooded in, demanding money that I didn't have because Roger had already depleted our bank account. The nightmare lasted for almost 6 years, during which I raised Alicia alone, working 3 jobs to make ends meet, and stealing everything valuable from our house before he disappeared. When that wasn't enough, they kept returning, barging in, demanding money, and then simply camped out in our house, trashing what little we had left, flipping over pots and pans, and breaking dishes, all to intimidate me. It wasn't until when Alicia entered elementary school, I had already paid off the majority of her major debts. Only then did the house feel peaceful once more. Had she truly forgotten all of that? Had she forgotten how her classmates used to harass her in the schoolyard, calling her a deadbeat's daughter? Had she forgotten the evenings when every loud noise at the door made her freak out, fearing that another debt collector had arrived to threaten us? She had forgotten the tears, the anger, and the words she once screamed that she hated the coward who left us. She must have seen it all on my face, the disbelief, the ache, and the fury, because she jumped in before I could say anything. Besides, I just want a chance to experience fatherly love once more. You can't expect me to give that up, can you? I muttered to myself, I can't believe it. I put everything I had into I lowered my gaze to look at my rough, cracked hands, which were worn from decades of labor and sacrifice, but in that video, Eva's hands were soft and well-maintained, unaffected by a single day of hardship. Mom Alicia stated flatly, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world, that your father and Eva were in love from the beginning and that he only married you because you were pregnant. You were the one who ended a couple who genuinely loved one another. Without you, Dad wouldn't have had to leave for so long and would not have been able to be in my life. You were the one who let him stay, and after hearing her fervently defend them, I couldn't contain my rage and raised my hand, nearly hitting her. You're going to hit me, Alicia. You're a bad grandma, I hate you, you're mean to my mom, you're a terrible awful grandma, I like Eva better, I don't like you, you're old and ugly. Emma didn't hesitate, she ran straight toward me and repeatedly threw her tiny fists against my legs while screaming, you're a terrible, awful grandma. My heart fell when Alexander stood there clumsily, not trying to stop her. It was cruel and obvious to them that I had always been an outsider in this house. I had raised Alicia alone. When she married and threw herself into her career, it was only natural that she called me to help raise Emma. I had dedicated my entire life to working, giving up, and sacrificing. I barely touched Emma when I reached out to gently push her away, but she stumbled and fell on her backside, exploding into a dramatic, ear-piercing wail. Alicia gave me a fierce look and hurried to take her daughter into her arms, her eyes roiling with rage. Dad was right, she snapped. You always blow up like some hysterical lunatic whenever things don't go your way, so what if Emma accidentally hit you a couple times? There was a flash of guilt on Alicia's face, but she spoke coldly and defensively. That's not what I meant. I'm just saying that what's done is done and that you can't stop making a scene, but I was already too embarrassed. She's just a child. Which is why Dad left you for 30 years. I stared at her in shock, unable to believe those heartbreaking, cruel words had come from my own daughter's mouth. I took a deep breath and realized how stupid my daughter had become. I paid off your father's debts for decades, so now that he's back, why shouldn't I ask? I'm too tired and hurt to argue with her any longer. Give me Roger's phone number. She froze, and her entire posture changed. She became alert, guarded, and suspicious. You're not planning to go after Dad and Eva, are you? You have no right to ask him for anything, you chose to pay those debts. I let out a bitter laugh as I stared at the daughter I thought I knew, and then I realized I'd never really known her at all, having raised her for more than 30 years. For what's owed to me, the bitterness in my heart was suffocating, and all those years of sacrifice were reduced to nothing in her eyes. Alicia snapped back without missing a beat. But in her heart, I couldn't compare to a father who had never done a thing for her. I was done when I said, get out, my voice trembling with rage, I don't want to see you again. This is my house, if anyone's leaving, it's you. Alicia shot back, defiant and unapologetic, convinced that I had nowhere else to turn after she got married, so I sold my old house to help her buy a new one. I ended up living with them because of that, and at the time I had already spent all of my savings on paying off Roger's debts. She was aware of this, which is why she felt so secure, and I let out a long, tired sigh earlier today. I had intended to tell Alicia when she got home that all of Roger's debts following our marriage had been paid off years ago, thanks to an investment I had made a few years prior. Skyrocketed in value, and not only was I finally debt-free, but I also had more than enough money to buy her a bigger house, possibly even a new car. However, now that everything was over, Patricia shouldn't take it personally. Alicia was just upset, and she didn't mean it. Alexander finally intervened, trying to defuse the situation by giving Alicia a look that implied that she should stop, but Alicia didn't care and turned her head, and utterly unimpressed by the thought that I might actually leave, I asked myself. Where could she go if I weren't supporting her and letting her stay with us? I stared at her clenched hands, forcing myself to maintain my composure. After a long silence, I spoke quietly, with a bitter edge in my voice, fine, I'll leave. I had spent my entire life believing that I would finally be able to spend my twilight years with my family, enjoying the joy of my grandchildren, but in the end, all it took was a deadbeat ex-husband and an unappreciative daughter to ruin everything. My life had turned into a cruel, twisted joke that no one was laughing at, and I said nothing more in front of the 3 people I had once thought of as family. I turned and started packing my belongings, and none of them attempted to stop me. They simply watched as I packed my belongings into a suitcase. When I was about to leave, Alicia called out to my mother, and for a brief moment, my heart softened. I nearly turned around because, after all, she was still my daughter, and I had given her everything I had. I didn't think she would ask me to stay, but I was mistaken. When she said, "You can go, but don't go bothering Dad," the small smile that had just started to appear on my lips froze. I slammed the door behind me and remained silent, but as it clicked shut, I heard their voices from inside. "Baby, are we really letting your mom just walk out like that? What's there to worry about? He's got maybe $200 on her. Where's she going? To go? This is just to teach her a lesson, and she'll come crawling back by." I laughed bitterly outside in the morning, so this is what my daughter thought of me. In a way, Alicia wasn't wrong. I didn't have more than $200 in cash on me most months. Half of my retirement check went toward helping her pay the mortgage, with the remaining portion covering groceries and other necessities. That night, I ended up paying $50 per night to stay at a dilapidated motel. The room was musty and damp, and the bed creaked with every movement. I dreamed that I was holding a young Alicia in my arms and begging debt collectors at our door for more time, pleading for mercy. Back then, sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. I was up before dawn every day working 3 jobs just to make ends meet. I used to tie Alicia to my back in order to block out the restless fragments of memories of the past. I had clawed my way through those terrible years, paying off every last bit of Roger's debt, and now, just when I thought the worst was over, he reappeared. The image from the video flashed in my mind again, startling me awake. I sat up, checked my bank account, and then I noticed the calendar alert. I had been wearing a cloth sling while I worked. The first thing I did was buy myself a new phone because the old one was almost 8 years old and was a birthday present. Alicia had once mentioned getting me a new phone, but I told her not to waste her time. I stared at the monthly reminder to transfer money toward Alicia's mortgage for a moment, then calmly swiped my finger across the screen and deleted it. For the first time in a long time, I felt a faint, fragile sense of relief. I called a real estate agent after getting a new phone because I wanted to look at move-in-ready apartments that were fully furnished and easy to settle into, but I didn't expect to run into Roger and Eva. It's even more ironic that we were looking at the exact same property. There's a reason they say that nothing burns hotter than hatred when enemies meet. When the time came, Ia suddenly showed up clutching Roger's arm, looking as radiant and self-satisfied as ever. She was well into her 50s, just like me, but she somehow managed to look like the pampered princess she had been 30 years prior, untarnished by hardship and glowing from years of indulgence. The real estate agent, who was obviously trying to raise the price, made a show of it in front of me. These two had just returned from Germany and were going to sign the contract today. Said, "It's been decades. Can't you let go of my husband?" "Already, your husband?" Eva laughed coldly, her eyes fixed on Roger. "So when can debt-dodging lowlifes travel abroad?" Eva tightened her grip on Roger's arm as if she were staking a claim, snapping at Patricia. I casually tucked a strand of hair behind her. I glanced at her and looked her in the eye, but Eva had misunderstood one thing. I had nothing left for Roger but disdain, but that didn't mean I missed the chance to make fun of them both. "Are you sure he's your husband?" The last time I looked, when Roger disappeared, we were still legally married, and I never filed for divorce. I looked at her again. "So you've been holding on to someone else's husband?" I can't help but laugh in his face because, of course, he wants a divorce now that I've paid off every trace of the debt he left behind. Roger wouldn't stand by and watch his precious Eva get insulted, so he pulled her into his arms and furrowed his brow in outrage. "Patricia, I acknowledge that it was wrong for me to disappear without saying anything, but I'm here now to finalize our divorce." Divorce, but I wasted every dollar I spent cleaning up his mess and every year of my youth carrying the burden he left behind. "I want it back, okay? Then start by paying me back for everything I've covered for you over the last 30 years, and then forget it." Roger gave me a look like he expected that you hadn't changed at all, and I was still totally focused on the money. All the years of humiliation, sacrifice, and silence erupted in that moment when my eyes locked onto a broom leaning against the backyard patio wall. In one stride, I grabbed it and charged straight. I thought my teeth might break. Anyone else could accuse me of being materialistic, but he was the only one who had the right to say anything. "Regarding Roger, you jerk, who the hell do you think you are judging me? You have the audacity to return, and I've suffered for you by picking up every fragment you left behind when you played house with your mistress 30 years ago. Why didn't you just stay dead?" I feel like I'm losing all control as I swing the broom with everything I own, and Roger darts around and swings every blow with fury. No one dared stop me from stumbling and dodging around the room until I finally vented my anger and stood there trembling and in pain. Then, exactly at that moment, Alicia entered the room, asking, "What are you doing?" Alicia hurried to Roger's side, protecting him as if he were the one being attacked, her face filled with concern for him and nothing but disgust and rage when she looked at me because she hadn't sent a message since I left home yesterday. Alicia had dropped everything for Roger when she showed up in the middle of the workday, leaving everything behind. Just moments before, Eva had been content to stand by smugly, but now she casually strolled over, almost as if to provoke me even more. Alicia purposefully slipped her arm through Eva's and leaned against her with exaggerated intimacy. "Look at yourself, Mom," she snapped. "Look at the scene you're creating. Eva is so gentle and graceful, and you're acting like some shrieking lunatic." She said, "Did you follow Dad here on purpose just because you found out he was buying this house?" Only then did I remember why I was here in the first place. I looked apologetically at the young real estate agent who accompanied me. While utterly disregarding Alicia, I took out my bank card and gave it to the agent. I said, "I'll take the house. We can settle the payment and sign the contract now, and please kindly ask these irrelevant people to leave my home." The real estate manager blinked in shock at my decisiveness and apparent wealth, but he wasn't sure whether to accept the card. "Ma'am, don't you want to haggle over the price with the seller first, Alicia?" I laughed, thinking that I was bluffing my mother. "Please, you only have $200 in your possession. Don't waste their time. Dad is already planning to buy this place." Eva also looked at me with open contempt. "Patricia, you've been the same way. For years, always needing to win and being so fixated on saving face." I didn't intend to tell Alicia about my investments and how they had increased. I pointed at Roger and said, "Of course I have money. Every cent of debt I paid for Roger over the years, I remember it all. If he wants a divorce, he can pay me back first." The young agent next to me, obviously uncomfortable with how they were treating me, spoke up on my behalf if they were never legally divorced in value, or that her mortgage was now in danger of default because I was no longer paying it, could make a claim and demand payment for all those years of marital assets. Eva's face turned pale and red, her expression alternating between shame and incredulity. She turned to Roger and begged him to show her how much he truly loved her by keeping her nameless and titleless, but before he could respond, his daughter stood up and defended him once more. "Mom, please stop. We're family." "Why do you?" When he saw Eva's begging face, Roger, to his credit, still had some dignity left. He took a check out of his pocket and held it out to me, saying, "I know I owe you this. It's a check for one." I laughed sharply and coldly, wanting nothing more than to crack her head open and see what kind of garbage was rattling around in there. Think of it as my way of making things right. Alicia appeared to be about to say something, but as soon as her eyes met that check, she fell silent. I knew exactly what she was thinking, and she was already figuring out how much of that money she could get her hands on. Prior to giving her back every penny, I didn't give her a chance, so I took the check without saying anything, turned to the agent, and said, "Go ahead, Leighton, process." Then I turned to the others and asked, "What are you still standing here waiting for me to throw you out?" Roger looked at me and then sighed. "Patricia Leighton, go to the courthouse next week and make the divorce official." I didn't answer. And he was unaware that I had already filed for divorce under presumed death 10 years after he vanished, so legally I wasn't divorced. Even though the apartment was fully furnished and ready to move in, there were still many necessities that needed to be purchased. Fortunately, the young real estate agent who had previously assisted me stayed behind and handled everything, accompanying me from room to room. I was widowed, so I gave Roger a half-hearted nod to feign agreement once he and Eva left Alicia, realizing that I had no intention of speaking to her. Helping to unpack and organize, and by the time everything was finally in order, it was past midnight. I watched her, sweating profusely and working without complaining, and I felt a pang of guilt. She was roughly my daughter's age, but she was so different from me that I asked her for her contact information and asked her to give me her bank account number so I could send her an additional payment as a thank you, but she flatly refused, saying her commission was more than enough and that she couldn't take any more. I persisted, but she wouldn't budge, so I gave up after she left. I took a long shower and finally stretched out on the new Simmons mattress I had just purchased. It was incredibly comfortable and soft, much more so than the old, worn-out bed I had been sleeping on for years. For the first time in a long time, I slept. The following morning, I was startled awake by a loud, relentless banging at the front door. It sounded like someone was trying to punch a hole straight through it, so I didn't open it right away. Instead, I looked through the peephole and saw Alicia Alexander and little Emma standing at my door with multiple suitcases and bags in tow. "Mom, is this really going to be our new home, Emma?" Wonder's eyes widened sweetly as Alicia knelt down and stroked Emma's hair, saying, "Of course it is, baby. This is Grandma's house, and from now on it'll be ours too." Emma looked a little perplexed, but her mother said, "Didn't you say you don't like Grandma? Why are we living with her?" Alicia's expression froze for a moment before she swiftly covered Emma's mouth with her hand and lowered her voice. Her words made my stomach turn, so I calmly picked up the phone and called the villa's property management office. "Hello, there are some strangers loitering outside my door. I can't say that in front of your grandmother, okay, and I'm her only daughter, so all of her money will eventually be mine. Why should she live in this large house alone while we squeeze into that tiny old place?" I heard Alicia screaming and protesting, her voice rising higher and higher, but when the guards threatened to call the police if they didn't leave right away, the three of them had no choice but to turn around and slink away in defeat after Alicia. "Please send someone to remove them and ensure they're never allowed onto the property again." Security arrived from behind the door within minutes. "Mom, you're really that heartless. I said a few things, and now you want to break off all contact with me? Why can't you ever consider things from my point of view? Dad only has one daughter, me, and he and Eva never had children. If I stay close to them, their inheritance will eventually be mine." Her family was expelled, and she began bombarding my phone with messages. "It's okay, but don't come crawling back to me when you're old and useless, pleading with me to take care of you." I didn't reply to a single message, and the more I remained silent, the more unhinged her texts becoming spiteful and out of control. "Although I didn't say anything, you used Dad's $1 million to buy a house, and now you're holding a grudge against me." Was going crazy over the idea that I had $1 million. What if she discovered that there was still a large investment account in my name? God knows how avaricious she would become at that point. I had to acknowledge that Alicia had inherited all of Roger's selfishness, and this family was completely destroyed. When the court date that Roger had recommended finally came around, I didn't go because I hadn't heard from him. Instead, Alicia came in first. Eva has been patiently standing by Dad's side for all these years, she just wants to be acknowledged. Is that so wrong? I held the phone away from my ear out of fear that I would snap and end up throwing my brand new phone at the wall. I waited until she finally ran out of breath before responding. "You took Dad's money," calling me full of indignation. "Why won't you divorce him?" I knew it. Your father lived a carefree life with his mistress during those years, and I was the one who paid off all of his debts, working myself into the ground to raise you alone. You think Eva has it rough, but have you forgotten how you were humiliated as a child and ridiculed for being the daughter of a deadbeat? What about me? The last straw for me was when she was quiet for a short while on the other end, but her voice returned, still full of resentment. "But that's all in the past, isn't it? Blood Eva is decent, she's just attempting to keep the family together. What's so wrong about doing that?" I laughed coldly. "Kind. You really believe Evie is a saint, do you? It's a coincidence that they just appeared again, and now that I've paid off everything and established a comfortable life, she's cozying up to you because she sees you as a ticket to a simpler future. She knows that I did all the grunt work, and she wants to enjoy the benefits. If you think about it, why else would a woman be so eager to connect with her former rival's daughter? You really believe that she's engaging in this behavior because..." "Love," I stopped and asked her one last thing. "I'm going to ask you once, just once, who are you choosing, your father or me?" The silence that followed revealed that Alicia had made her decision. She had chosen Roger, who had abandoned us for 30 years and given her nothing but a last name. Then, that $3 million that was sitting in my investment account, she would never see a dime of it, okay? I told her that you were no longer my daughter, so don't call me mom ever again, don't get in touch with me, and don't come near my house. I hung up without waiting for a response, and as a precaution, I sent her the official death certificate I had issued for Roger years prior when I filed for divorce. Your father is already dead, so how am I supposed to divorce a corpse? I then blocked every phone number and contact associated with Alicia and her family, and I immediately cut them out of my life. I didn't even need to imagine it, I could already picture Roger's reaction when he learned that he had been officially declared dead. It must have been a terrifying scene. Of course, they attempted to find me, but the villa's security stopped them at the gate. Even if they were able to break in, I wouldn't think twice about calling the police and accuse them of illegal entry. Roger had been living in the shadows for years, making a little money under the radar, and now he was attempting to cling to Alicia for support in his later years, and finally give Eva the legal status she had been longing for. However, he was dead, at least officially, and until that status was reversed, forget about purchasing a home, even simply surviving would be difficult. This was something I really didn't anticipate. However, the extent to which Alicia would go to please him was revealed when word spread quickly among our former neighbors about my leaving Alicia's house. Most of them denigrated Alicia, now calling her a thankless leech, and many of them continued to stay in touch with me out of kindness and respect. As a result, I learned everything there was to know about their situation. It turned out that, since Roger couldn't buy a house while he was dead, Alicia invited him and Eva to living in her home. Maria, my former neighbor, called me as soon as she learned that Alicia was unbelievable. If she had been my daughter, I would have disowned her by now. Patricia, don't let it bother you, treat her as though she never existed. You're better off without her. I told Maria that I was okay, struck up a conversation to lighten the mood, and hung up. Alicia truly had no shame in letting them into her home in that way, so she was able to enjoy the results of her decisions when it will be too late for her to realize what she gave up. She is unaware that Roger still owes almost $1 million for a personal loan from years ago, which I was never legally obligated to repay. The debt had lain dormant for all this time, so naturally, I took the responsible course of action and politely notified the creditors that the infamous runaway debtor had returned. I then hired a lawyer and completed my will. I've spent my entire life making sacrifices for others, first paying off debts, then raising Alicia, and then helping to care for Emma. After I pass away, everything I own, my savings, and my properties will be given to a charitable trust, where they will be professionally managed and donated to those in need. Alicia won't see a single cent. After everything was settled, I booked myself a luxurious vacation package and left on a month-long journey across the nation. I made a commitment to myself that I would no longer live in service of other people's needs or expectations because I was almost 60 years old, had nothing left to hold me back, and could do whatever I wanted with time and money on my side. I traveled from coast to coast, saw breathtaking landscapes, and realized how big and beautiful life could be. I used to think my world revolved around on my journey. I met strong women who, like me, had been betrayed by ungrateful children. They too had chosen freedom over frustration, and we laughed, shared stories, and enjoyed life together. After 3 months, I finally returned home, exhausted but fulfilled, because age was catching up to me and all the travel had left me. I spent my twilight years around my small family, helping Alicia clean up after her death. I was a little exhausted, so the first thing I did when I got back was make an appointment for a complete medical examination so I could start taking care of myself properly. However, as I was about to enter the hospital, I ran into Alicia, who attacked me and blocked the entrance. Her face was twisted with anger, and she didn't care who was watching. Mom, why didn't you tell me that Dad's debts weren't paid off? You stole his money. How could you do that? She truly believed she could just waltz back into my life, reassign my assets, and write off everything she did as if it were nothing. You have no idea what kind of mess this has caused, and those people came right to our house. What does Alexander think of me now, and what does he think of Dad? I want you to take that $1 million and use it to put the house in your name so we can all live together again. If you do that, I'll let the past go, and we'll call it incredible. You wanted that money over my dead body, Alicia. You made your decision. You and Roger are a family. As I previously told you, I no longer have a daughter. Despite my best efforts to remain composed, I had no intention of letting her drain any more of my energy. She faltered the moment she saw my lack of interest, and the confidence and arrogance she always wore like armor suddenly cracked because deep down I would always be the mother who forgave, who folded, who crawled back after every fight due to the fact that I only had one daughter, but I had already let that go. She was 30 years old, married, and had a family of her own. This was the foundation of her boldness, the cruel words, the betrayal, and the manipulation. She never feared the consequences. Mother could, and based on her greed and selfishness, I no longer believed that she would take care of me in my old age. If I ever became too old to manage, I would just take my money and check into the best retirement community available, Mom said softly. I'm sorry, okay, I was wrong. I shouldn't have picked a fight with you over Dad. Please don't be angry anymore. Forgive me, will you? She said. To be clear, I never said she couldn't get back in touch with Roger. That was her projection, her guilt, her paranoia. What I couldn't accept, though, was how easily she could tell me to leave her house and how quickly she could put her arms around the woman who destroyed our family as if I hadn't ever existed. You're not the wrong one, I knew what she was thinking. When she said quietly, I made a mistake by not raising you better. Her face twisted in frustration, and she blushed. Why isn't she forgiving me, she asked. Why isn't this playing out as it always has? She believed that if I apologized once, I would immediately revert to my previous role of being a humble, forgiving, desperate woman who wanted to mend things, but I wasn't that woman anymore. To put it simply, even if I were to forgive you, you would still not receive a dime. I have already stipulated in my will that every dollar and piece of property I own will be donated to a charity upon my death, which will support the education of underprivileged children who truly deserve a chance. If you have the time to pursue my money, perhaps use it for something worthwhile. Considering your life and your beloved father's gift of that $1 million, which was my just compensation, I will never return it. Additionally, please note that he still owes more than $1 million, which is his debt and not mine. He wanted to purchase a mansion, didn't he? Let's check to see if he is truly as wealthy as he says. Surely, a successful man like him wouldn't be scurrying over a few. The moment I brought up the will, Alicia's face went white. You wrote a will, so who said you could do that? How could you be such a selfish mother? Why are you treating me like this when that money is still my father's? In the end, it should have been mine, and you're just hoarding it to hurt me. She was practically screaming as if I had stolen something she was entitled to, as if I were some cold-blooded villain rather than the I said flatly, I'm done wasting breath. I've been waiting weeks for this appointment at one of the best private hospitals in the city. If I don't check in soon, I'll miss my slot. Alicia stood there stomping her foot in frustration, but all she could do was glare at my back as I left, calm and collected. In the end, I didn't even look back. The sky had already started to darken by the time I completed my full body examination. Fortunately, nothing serious was discovered. Instead, it was just years of internal strain and accumulated fatigue that required time to heal and rest. When I left the hospital, Allison had long since left the place where she had been, so I assumed that everything had been made clear. Since they were still unable to pass the villa community's gates, she brought Emma along in the hopes that a child's presence would eventually soften me. Grandma, I missed you so much. Emma's sweet little voice rang out the moment she saw me. She smiled brightly and ran toward me with her arms outstretched, but that smile, which I had once found so endearing, now only brought back memories of the day she screamed how much she hated me, revealing her mother's contempt. I didn't react as they had anticipated. Instead of opening my arms to embrace her, I moved to the side, and Emma staggered forward, missing her mark, almost falling, and turning to face me. She screamed, no longer pretending to be sweet, bad grandma, I don't like you, I hate you, I never want to see you again, as the mask fell. She was obviously shocked and confused. Perhaps she was too young to comprehend what had happened, or perhaps she had simply forgotten all of Alicia's practiced instructions. Alicia hurried to her side, covering her mouth quickly and forcing a smile at me. Before we arrived, Emma continued to cry for a while before finally stopping, her little face still frowning at me with resentment. Children don't really know how to lie, but it was obvious that she had long stopped seeing me as her grandmother due to Alicia and Alexander's influence, even though I was the one who changed her diapers, fed her bottles, and stayed up at night to console her. No patience left, I didn't even want to look at them anymore, so don't come looking for me again. I said icily, I've already told you that you won't get a cent from me, but instead of turning to leave, Alicia abruptly collapsed to her knees in front of me, her eyes swollen and red. I was taken completely by surprise. Even if you kneel, it won't make a difference, Mom. Her voice broke, and tears finally began to fall. When the debt collector, who had long written off the possibility of ever seeing that money again, learned that Roger was back, he naturally came knocking. At first, Roger pretended to be a reformed man who claimed to have made it in business and that he could definitely repay the debt. However, everything falls apart. Dad takes Eva and runs off with all our savings, every penny, Alexander said. He was given a few days' grace by his polished appearance and self-assured remarks, but in reality, Roger didn't have that much money. If he had, he wouldn't have been snatching Alicia in the first place. The debt collector quickly realized that Roger had been duped once more, and he was even getting ready to vanish, just like he had done all those years prior. Panic ensued as the collector started to show up at Alicia's house. Roger became desperate and came crawling to me to get back the $1 million check he had given me. Patricia, please, we were married once. Come on, give me that money back for the time being. I swear I'll return it when things settle down. He spoke with a humility I hadn't seen in years. Roger's constant shouting and demands for repayment were causing chaos in their household. The same man who had disappeared for 30 years, leaving me to drown in his debts while he lived happily with his mistress, now had the gall to ask for a favor. What a joke. Roger, if you want me to think it's a joke, get down on your knees and apologize. It was a cruel little jab, a sarcastic throwaway line, but to my surprise, he actually did it. He dropped to his knees and begged for shame. His face was etched with desperation. I looked at Eva and raised my eyebrows, saying, Eva, just do it for me, for us. Roger's pride twisted in his face, but he turned to Eva and said, Eva, just do it for me, for us. Eva's face flushed. Shek had been living the good life all these years while I was stuck cleaning up your mess. Roger clenched his jaw and gave her a beseeching look, and finally, in spite of all the anger and humiliation, Eva knelt next to him, her eyes crying. Her lips were red and then white, and her voice was as high-pitched as shards of glass. I smiled mockingly, saying, "Don't want to kneel? Then don't bother asking for the money." I felt humiliated and resentful, but as I watched the two of them snarling on the ground, I didn't feel victorious or vindicated. Instead, I just felt empty because all those years of suffering seemed to have suddenly stopped mattering. I smiled slightly, but it didn't seem to matter anymore. Roger snapped, his head up, his features twisting in disbelief and rage. "You're kidding me, but I'm not, and if you try anything, just keep in mind that this place is monitored, and if you make any threats or use any violence, I'll make sure you're arrested before you even get to the door. The money you gave me wasn't a gift, rather, it was payment for 30 years of suffering and debt that you dumped on me. You can't take it back." I turned and left them. All that's left are two clowns scurrying for scraps, but Roger wasn't done because he couldn't get anything from me. He then turned to face Alicia, who hadn't suspected anything until she discovered that the home safe had been broken into, taking all of their money, jewelry, and valuables she had saved over the years, including the gifts I had once scrimped and saved to give her. At first, she thought it was a burglary, so she called the police and filed a report, but the Roger and Eva had disappeared again about 30 years ago, and the investigation made everything crystal clear. Roger's legal identity had not been fully restored, so it was almost impossible to track him down at this point. He had stolen over $30,000 in cash, and with the jewelry and valuables, the loss was easily over $500,000. That's when I realized Alicia had never been struggling, she had only feigned poverty to keep me broke. Alexander, who could no longer stand it, accused her of bringing a thief into their house and gave her a deadline to get the money back or face divorce. With nowhere else to go, Alicia came crawling back, standing in front of me as the daughter I once loved so much, crying helplessly in shame and desperation. Did I feel pity for her? Perhaps, but only temporarily, as I knew that if I assisted her now, I would only be enabling her once more, and years later, she would forget it just as she would have with every sacrifice I had ever made. She needed to fall, she needed this failure to finally face reality, and why had she ever thought that a man who had abandoned her for 30 years would suddenly become a loving father overnight? I told her quietly, "I told you before that I no longer have a daughter," and she looked at me in shock before sobbing uncontrollably and falling to the ground. However, no matter how bitter her sobs were or how much her shoulders trembled with tears, it didn't make a difference. Some wounds don't heal with apologies, and I'm not sure how Alicia cleaned up the mess after everything fell apart. However, Alexander did ultimately proceed with the divorce. Whatever money remained in their joint bank account was divided and used to pay off a portion of the mortgage early in the settlement. They divided the house equally. However, Alexander eventually paid Alicia a lump sum to buy out her share, and he threw her out with Emma. He didn't even bother to fight for custody, and from what I've heard, he hardly pays the court-ordered child support, and even that meager. I can honestly say that all men are the same, but Alicia was unaware that even before the divorce, I had already witnessed Alexander shopping arm in arm with another woman. Their body language was too intimate to be innocent, and that divorce was inevitable. After the split, Alicia's entire demeanor changed, becoming erratic and irritable and resentful. She quickly ruined a big project at work and was fired. Now, she's living off the little money she had left over from the divorce, living in a dilapidated trailer with Emma. Over time, she developed some bad habits, started gambling, and started drinking too much. By the time Emma was old enough to start school, Alicia couldn't even afford the enrollment fees, and I couldn't bear to watch the child suffer because of her mother's decisions, so I called a local school and discreetly paid for several years of her tuition in secret. After all, a child should always have access to an education, and Alicia was unaware that I had made that happen. Yes, I softened once more, I acknowledge it, but I made a promise to myself that that would be the last time I did it if Alicia was unable to pull herself together after all of this, because no one, not even her own mother, can save her. As for Roger and Eva, the police have finally revealed some new information. It turns out that their alleged business endeavors over the years were far from legitimate, and it didn't take long for them to reveal the truth about Roger's alleged business success. It turns out that the money he had made over the years wasn't earned honestly, rather, it was stolen. This time, he wasn't so fortunate because both the debt collector and Alicia filed police reports, which allowed the authorities to finally connect the dots. He had been running small-scale scams in various states, deftly staying under the radar with identity theft, fake investment schemes, and fraudulent contracts. He was a con artist in every sense of the word, which is how he'd managed to fund his brief life of luxury with Eva. Appearing in old case files, witnesses came forward, patterns were matched, and the web of lies he had been spinning for years was finally exposed. His crimes were no longer hearsay, they were hard evidence. Eva wasn't merely a passive bystander. She had assisted him in money laundering, concealed records, and even pretended to be a business partner in some of the operations. Eva was found guilty as an accomplice and charged with aiding and abetting. Both of them received lengthy prison sentences, Roger for multiple counts of fraud, Eva for conspiracy, and Eva for obstruction. Meanwhile, Alicia reached her lowest point, with no one left to turn to, but then something changed when she saw Emma start school, a miracle made possible by an anonymous benefactor, which she never knew was me, and I never planned to tell her, but maybe that act alone ignited something inside of her, and she started to think that perhaps for the first time in years, someone up there was giving her another chance. Alicia quit drinking and gambling, and she gradually got better. She began taking part-time jobs, cleaning offices, stocking shelves, and answering phones. She didn't take pride in it. Instead, she was determined to get back on her feet. Every few weeks, a letter would arrive in my mailbox. It was always from her, and she never once begged for forgiveness or to be allowed back. Instead, she wrote brief, sincere letters that were full of regrets, reflections, and apologies. I read them all, even when I wasn't sure I wanted to. Over time, the anger inside of me subsided. I couldn't pretend nothing had happened. I couldn't erase the pain. Booty might decide to release the burden it left behind, so I spoke with my lawyer and changed my will once more. A separate trust would be established, and $200,000 would be released gradually after Emma is accepted to college. Monthly installments would only be carefully managed, and it would be a quiet offering, not for Alicia, but for the future her daughter still deserves. I never told her I didn't plan to, but to hope that one day she will realize that not everything I did was motivated by resentment. Buried beneath years of disappointment, some things were simply acts of love. As for me, I've finally found peace. My days are now simple, quiet, and joyful. I garden in the mornings, attend painting classes on the weekends, and arrange quick trips whenever I feel like it. I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in decades, I don't fear it. I feel free and incredibly thankful for the simple comfort of a life I created on my own.